We have a super exciting guest today, dude. I don't know if you know anything about Connor Fields or not, but he's kind of a big deal in the BMX world.
Will, you were the biggest thing in BMX that I knew, and you have introduced me to more BMX badasses in the past few weeks than I knew even existed. That's pretty amazing what these young people are accomplishing out there in the world. Very impressive for sure.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And this guy's accomplished more than, I mean, this guy pretty much accomplished everything that you want to accomplish in your BMX career. You know what I mean? Like he is the gold medalist. He was the USA BMX number one. I mean, he's literally one of the best to ever do the sport. So I'm really excited to have a conversation with him and just learn how he got so good.
Yeah. So has he been to the farm?
No, no.
Okay, so that's
He
we got to
stays
upsell him to the farm. You've got to offer him like a residence package that
okay.
is attractive or something. I don't
I don't even know if this place is nice enough for a gold medalist yet.
know.
uh No, but that'd be pretty cool to have him out here one day. I know he's doing some coaching and training himself, and we've actually had a couple of his athletes out here. I'm pretty sure he only trains three guys, and they're all three like one of the best in the sport right now. Um, and two of them have spent time at the farm, so it's pretty cool. Um, yeah, I'm excited to talk to him.
Yeah.
Have
So
you
when
heard
did you?
anything from him? Do you know if he's? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was curious when you first were in contact with him. I mean, y'all have been in the sport together for a little while, but when did you two first connect?
Actually from racing. We're the exact same age. So I think I met him first when I was 12 years old, and he
Wow.
came to my home track at Tampa BMX to a national and cut me off and smoked me pretty much all weekend. Like it was some of the best, most aggressive riding I've ever seen in my life, and I was just like, "What just happened?"
Nice.
So that was the first, and I've seen him at races pretty much since then, since I was 12 years old. Him just pretty much tearing it up. It wasn't until I think, he could clarify this, but when he turned like 15, he started just tearing it up and almost winning all of the biggest races on the highest levels, when he was at 15. But I think he grew up like battling a lot in the pack.
Okay.
And I think that's maybe where he learned a lot of his racecraft. But hey, I'm excited to ask him.
Well, he is in the waiting room, so I'm going to let him in,
Yeah, bring him on,
Will.
bring him
And
on.
if I disappear off camera, it's because my dogs are being delivered to me, and I need to go answer the door. So
All
you
right.
take it until further notice.
How's it going, brother?
Good, good. How about you? What's going on over there?
Not much, man. Just building the dream over here in Florida, man. What have you been up to lately? It's been some time since you're been racing yourself, and I know you got a lot of few new things that you got going on, and I'm excited to hear about it.
Yeah, yeah. I've got a lot of different stuff going on. So I guess first off, I'm doing some coaching, so helping everything from beginners and stuff at clinics locally, as well as traveling, and then doing some coaching for a handful of high-end athletes that are trying to make the next jump. I'm doing some work with my agency as well. I did my senior internship in college there, and then I'm still working with my agency as an assistant, as well as I've got some other stuff in the works. Can't really let anything out yet, but let's just say I've auditioned for a few different things, and once I know whether I get it or not, I can report back.
Are you telling us that you're going to be a movie star, Connor? Be honest.
Maybe a TV star, perhaps.
All right, it's going to be The Bachelor. It's going to be Survivor or Price is Right. Which one?
None of those. None of those. But The Bachelor would be stressful, man. I can barely handle one girl, let alone 30.
So you mentioned your agency. What does that mean, or what are you doing with that?
So when I was a senior in college, it's 2019, I needed an internship to graduate with my business degree. And so I reached out to my agent, who I've worked with since 2011, and just asked, is there any internships I could do. And he said, yeah, he's done internships before. And so basically, I would help him read through contracts. I would help him make sure that his clients were meeting their requirements, such as, certain number of social media posts or being at a certain place at a certain time, or just kind of managing the clients, as well as kind of fielding inquiries and filtering them, like this one is worthwhile to pursue, this one is spam, things like that. Which, when you have, like my agent does, when you have 20 plus clients, you get hundreds and hundreds of emails per day. So I did that, and I helped him out with some stuff there, and then it went really well. And he asked me if I was interested in continuing on as an assistant, and I've just been kind of doing some of that with him ever since.
So does that mean that you're currently working with athletes to help them find sponsors?
Kinda. Depends on the athlete. So there's certain athletes that he just will handle personally himself, then other ones that I will assist more on. And it's not so much the finding sponsors as much as it's making sure that the athletes are doing what they need to be doing. Right. The finding sponsors is more his role. Except for there's a couple of athletes that I kind of run point on, and I do most of their stuff. But for most of his older, more established clients, it's more just making sure they're doing what they're supposed to do.
Are there any BMX racers today at some top levels that are kind of on your phone line asking you for advice like that? I've seen that you were with Isaac Kennedy the other day. Are there other athletes that I guess are just looking to you for advice on like sponsors and you're helping them out in that way?
Surprisingly, people don't ask me anything. And I don't understand it, because when I was younger, I asked all the older pros as many things as I could ask them. But people don't ask me anything like sponsor wise, and I don't want to come across a certain way when I say this, but like, I was able to get out of industry sponsors. You would think that people would say, like, how did you do that? How did you cross over and get out of industry sponsors? But no one ever asks.
What do you
Nobody
attribute that
asks.
to?
What's up?
What do you attribute that to? Why the change in behavior where people aren't curious any longer?
I don't. I have no idea what that is. I mean, I'm not saying nobody. Like, there are some people that have reached out, but I guess I'm just surprised by, like, I would think that everybody would be reaching out to me. A couple of the riders that I helped them because they reached out to me, and because I really respected that they reached out to me asking me a question. They reached out to me asking me a question about training, about what I thought about X versus Y in training. And I really just respected that somebody was like willing to ask somebody to learn more, because that's how you, in any industry and anything you do, that's how you get better, is you learn from people who know more than you, or people who have done it, and you ask them for help. And 9 times out of 10, people are willing to help because they were once in your shoes. They were once trying to figure it out. They were once trying to learn. But to answer your question, Will, it does surprise me that people don't ask me that much stuff. But Isaac is one of the athletes that I run point on. So I put together his chase deal, his 100% deal, some of the other stuff that he's got going on. And then we're working with the Australian Olympic team, because they've got their own set of sponsors and things going on down in Australia that he can tap into, that, somebody who's American wouldn't be able to tap into quite the same way.
So you said run point on, I haven't heard that before. So when you run point, that like you're working, helping him with his sponsors, like you're kind of like his manager in that point, or
Yeah.
what do you,
And
is there more
yeah.
athletes that you do that with?
Right now it's Isaac, it's Christian Craig, there's a mountain bike athlete, and then Felicia Stansel as well. I don't do any of her BMX stuff like S squared and all that, because she was already doing that. But like her 100% deal or anything else out of the industry, we're working on. We're always on calls and having conversations. But for every 100 conversations, one might turn into something. It's a process.
So do you wish more BMX racing athletes like hit you up on Instagram or Twitter or social media, like asking you questions on getting sponsors or getting better, or what do you?
I was just gonna say, I mean, there's really a very short list of people that can do that, right? Like, there's not very many athletes that are, you have to be able to win and market yourself and tick a lot of boxes in order to even have the opportunity to get out of the industry. Um, and then if you think about it from a manager perspective, standard manager fee is a 10% cut. If you're doing $1,000 deal, it's $100 cut. Like, that's not really worth anybody's time. Um, so, the number of athletes in the sport of BMX racing that it's worthwhile to help is, it's a short list. And then on top of that, the people that can actually reach out of industry, that list is tiny. It's Donnie Robinson, Elise Post, myself, Sam Willoughby, Mariana Payon. I mean, it's like just the best of the best. Plus, they have good image. Whereas there's other athletes, maybe they're good at competing and they get results, but they aren't good at marketing themselves and the image and dealing with kids and fans and things like that. So you got to have both. It's a combination.
What are a few of the top athletes that you do work with extremely close?
On the coaching side or on the managing side?
Well, what I'm hearing that kind of sounds cool is you're kind of in a position to help them in all areas, like
I
you.
won't. I won't cross two things over. So it's one or the. So I'm not going to tell Isaac what to do for training or what gate to pick, because that's not my role with him. And I don't want to kind of cross the two roles over, and that would lead to potential issues and drama down the road. Whereas Isaac has a coach and that they do all the training and all that stuff, and I just good luck and send in an invoice when he gets a bonus form type thing. Whereas like the riders that I help right now, it's only two. It's Ethan Popovich and Joey Lito, but I don't do anything with them as far as sponsorship. If they ask me a question, I'm happy to answer, but for them, it's just strictly squats and sprints and what gate to pick.
Yeah, I've had both Ethan and Joey here at the farm a pretty good amount. Ethan has been coming and staying with me for a while, and he's one of the most rad athletes that I've ever seen, because he's got the talent, he's got the hard work, he's got the heart. So it's really cool to see you kind of helping him out and taking him under your wing. And so what kind of things are you doing with your athletes as far as with training that you feel like sets their training apart?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, there's no magic pill, right? There's no super secret exercise that only a few people know about, or any magic, training philosophy. I'm just a big believer, and this is not just in training, this is in life. If I get the basics right, people are always looking for those little one percenters, and they're trying to, lose a gram on their bike, or they're trying to measure, exactly how they can, get 3 calories less or whatever. And in my mind, I'm focused more on, let's get the 99% right. Let's make sure that you're training with good form, you're getting proper rest, you have high intensity with what you're doing. You are making sure that you have training partners who are bringing out the best in you. Things like that, which I believe is more beneficial than kind of looking for those tiny little things. But with that being said, there's always room to improve. Nobody ever looks in the mirror and says, like, I'm strong enough, I'm fast enough, I'm explosive enough. Like, there's always room to get better. Or it's very rare for somebody to finish a weekend and say, I didn't make any mistakes this weekend. Right. And so until you can get through a weekend without hitting a gate, without casing a jump, without leaving an inside open, or the basics, like the most fundamental things, why are we trying to get fancy? Let's get the basics right. And if you look at the best of the best in the history of the sport, whether it was Maris Strombergs or Joris, has been going for 13 years. Joris does nothing fancy. He just gets the basics right. How often do you see him hit a gate? How often do you see him leave a door open? How often do you see him choke? He's basic. He gets the fundamentals correct, and everybody else around him does it. And even right now, this year, you could make the argument that Isaac and Cameron Wood are faster than him, but Isaac and Cameron Wood are making mistakes, and Joris is not making a mistake.
Yeah. What did you do that made your riding and your career so unique? Yeah, like what did you do uniquely that made you so great on the bike?
Um, I don't know. I mean, I guess I would have to attribute that to when I was younger and I was growing up. I wasn't the best, and I wasn't the strongest, and I wasn't the fastest. And so I guess I just, for years and years and years of losing, I had this like mindset of like it was never enough. I always had to do more and get better. Um, and I just fought for every inch, whether it was in training, whether it was in practice, whether it was in racing. Um, and so like nobody ever would question if I was trying as hard as I possibly could. Like that was never a question, right? And so I think like it just stuck with me as a kid when I wasn't the best, and I had to outwork everybody. I didn't have the talent of some of the other riders. I didn't have the natural born ability to just jump on a bike and be so smooth. I had to fight for it and earn it. Um, and I think that is kind of what set me up for success in the long run. Because once you hit pro, and not just in BMX, this is every sport. Once you hit the highest level, everybody's talented, everybody works hard, everybody's dedicated. But then there's levels to that of like, okay, you think you work hard. Well, have you seen how hard this rider works? You think that you push yourself in training. This dude's thrown up 3 times today and he's still out there going, right? There's just levels to that when you get to the pro ranks. And I think that's the slap in the face for a lot of young riders that they don't understand, because winning 16-year-old expert is a totally different ball game, and they think that they're working hard and they think that they're doing everything right. And to tie back in with Joey and Ethan, it's also explaining to them what it takes, and asking them, are you willing to make this commitment? Are you willing to sacrifice fun and drinking and going out? And, are you willing to have your body be sore and in pain for months? Like that's just part of it.
Yeah. How old were you when you started racing? And that was in Nevada, right?
Yeah, I was 7. It was 1999, and I started in Vegas, Nellis BMX.
And how long did it take you to turn expert and start doing nationals?
Yeah, we started doing nationals right away because back in the day, Vegas was NBL, and they had 2 or 3 nationals a year here. We had a few tracks, and so we just kind of got exposed to it right away. And then being in Vegas, I think it's a little bit like Florida. Like within a few hours, we're 4 hours from Phoenix, 4 hours from LA. There's a lot of racing within like a small window. Um, so we started racing kind of right away, and I just did NBL for a couple of years. And then I turned expert, I think when I was 8, like a year or so after I started racing. Um, and then I won the Grands when I was 8X at NBL, won the national title. And then after that, we decided to try ABA. And the first ABA national I went to, I got moto. And so I was coming in as like the #1, champ, thought I was a hot shot because I was winning the NBL Grands. And then went to an ABA race and got motoed. And then kind of had to decide at that point, do you want to be a big fish in a small pond, or do you want to swim with the sharks? And at that point, shifted over to ABA and got my ass kicked for a few years. And it was funny because growing up in Vegas, like there's nationals here, so I could go for the NBL title without going to. I had to go to like 2 races because there was 2 here. And so I think when I was like 11, and again when I was like 14 or 15, I did the NBL series I did 3 races and won the title. It was super easy, but like I couldn't barely make mains in ABA. It's a struggle that kids these days won't understand.
Why do you think ABA was producing so much better riders? Like,
I don't know. I think part of it has to do with where it is. So like the NBL was really big back east where the weather wasn't as good. I guess Florida doesn't really count for that, but New England and that area, Ohio and Michigan and stuff, they can't ride year round. And ABA was California, Arizona, Texas, where you can kind of ride year round. So I'm sure that helped. But I guess like rising tides raises all ships, right? So you get a couple of really good athletes and then everybody gets better around them because they have to. It was also a bit more intense, I think. Like NBL was a little bit more like fun and relaxed, and it used to be nicknamed Never Before Lunch because the race would never start before lunch. Everybody was just chilling. Whereas ABA was like, we're starting promptly at 8 o'clock and it's business. We're here to race. But it's funny to think back about that now because kids these days will have no idea.
Yeah. When you were growing up riding in Vegas, who were some riders that were local, just shredders that you looked up to?
Yeah, so when I was a kid, it was Nate Berkheimer and Derek Betcher were kind of the hot shots locally. They were 18 years old when I was starting, um, and then they were pro for the next few years. Then there was another kid named Nate Miller who won some NBL titles back in the day. There was always a lot of riders here that were talented. Again, we rode year round. You know, it rains in Nevada 15 times a year, or in Vegas 15 times a year. So like we don't ever have to take breaks. So there was a lot of talented riders. And even now, you know, there's been multiple national champions. You know, Roman Jaworski won a national title, and Jordy Scott, and now Cedric Cade, and like there's always been riders produced here. But I just think it's because of the constant riding. And now you can ride 7 days a week within a 40-minute radius. There's 4 tracks within 40 minutes of each other, and you can ride 7 days a week.
How important is it for younger riders, or was it for you to be able to ride so much and so consistently?
I mean, I think it's huge. I think it's one of those things where BMX is a little bit like gymnastics, I think, and some other sports where if you don't start at an extremely young age, you're not going to make it. Like if you start at 13, it's too late. Um, Not to say it can't be done, but I've never seen that done.
Yeah. I think Tyler Brown told me he was 13 when he started the other day. But I mean, he didn't win a gold medal, but he, you know.
I mean, he did well. I mean, he raced as a pro and
Yeah.
stuff. But yeah, him, and I know Christophe Lebec was the same
Hmm.
back in the day. But I think as time's gone on, it would be even harder now than it
Yeah.
was when Tyler was starting in 1992 or whatever it was.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like they have to start riding the bike when they're still almost learning to move, and like to get
Mhm.
their movements down. And then at 12, 13, you have a lot of your movement patterns kind of dialed in or getting dialed in. It's interesting to see that point.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what it is, but I think, you know, the bike time is huge, right? So if you look at somebody who lives in New York and they only ride 6 months a year, and somebody from Southern California rides one full year round, you know, after 2 years, they've got an extra year of riding.
Hmm.
So they don't have to stop and start again and take all this time off. And you know, I think it's something that is irreplaceable, just that bike time, especially when you're young.
How much were you on your bike time, or how much were you on your bike growing up, and did it change throughout your career?
It changed, yes, but as a kid, it was every day, and I think that's another mistake that a lot of kids make these days is they just only ride the track and they put their bike on the shelf. You know, we would ride skate parks. We would build wooden ramps in front of our house and jump ramps. We would go to dirt lots and build dirt jumps, or go to the track. Like it didn't matter what we were doing. We were on our bikes um, every day,
Every day.
literally every day. Um, you know, get home from school, grab your bikes, go meet up with your buddies and go ride. I'm sure there was days I didn't, right? But most of the time it was an everyday thing, and going to the track 3 and 4 nights a week, you know, as my parents were able to take me, getting off work or whatever it was. And then as you get older, you know, I think it shifts a little bit when you have to start prioritizing the physical side of it and lifting weights and conditioning and gym and sprints and things like that. You know, I'm a big believer that bike time is still the most important thing as you get older. You know, we don't race in a squat rack. You know, there's a lot of people in the world who can squat 4 plates. There's not a lot of people who can be smooth through a rhythm section. You know, and until you're smooth in a rhythm section, why even worry about how many plates you can squat? Um, you know, I won the Olympics in 2016. My max squat was 3 plates. I probably had the weakest squat out of everybody in there, but I was able to make it around the track smooth. You know, so you don't get a gold medal in the squat rack unless you're training to compete at a squat event, right? Um, but I think as I got older, I would ride less. You know, in the off season when it was, you know, months and months before race, you might ride once a week, you know, and just focus more on the physical stuff. And then as you get into the season and you're lifting less and you're focused more on being precise and timing and things like that, might be 3-4 times a week. When you're riding, you might only be lifting once a week. So it would change just kind of based around what was going on.
How old were you when you went from riding your bike every single day to then not and starting to train more gym? And like, what was the change like? Was it forced? Did
I started
someone
doing
make you? Or?
structured training when I was 16. So I hired German Medina, who's now the U.S. coach. I think it was like $200 a month I was paying him or something, and he was just emailing me some programs. And it was 3 sets of 10 squats on Monday and 10 sprints on Tuesday or whatever it was. And when I was 16, I was in high school chasing chicks and not 100% dedicated to racing, but I picked and choose what I did a little bit. Like I didn't follow it 100%, but it still gave me like the foundation of structure and following a plan. And there would be days where I'd have a 2 a day, but it would be a Wednesday. And so that would mean I have to get up before school and do some sprints and then go to school. And then after school, go to the track or whatever. And it just kind of taught me that discipline and that structure that it takes. I think that's a big adjustment for a lot of riders is structure, right? When you're a kid, you go to the track and you just flow and you have fun. You take an Insta video and post it mid practice and you get all the likes or whatever. And then you get older and you're there and you've got 8 half laps with 10-minute recovery breaks, and you're trying to specifically work on attacking backsides or getting pedals in between jumps or whatever it is that day that you're working on. And that's an adjustment because sometimes it's not fun and sometimes it's just work. But 16 would be the answer to that. And then I would say like I got serious in 2010 when I would have been 17, because I podiumed a World Cup in 09 when I was 16, and I was like, holy crap, I can actually maybe go to the Olympics. Maybe I should get serious now. And that was kind of when I flipped the switch and really started focusing.
Dude, getting a podium at a World Cup at 16 is, insane and unheard of. Like, how?
Well, if you watch the video, it's very clear. It wasn't because I was one of the fastest dudes down the hill. I had no gas, but
like you were getting around the track just better, right?
Yes, and that's really what it was that like that previous generation. Here's my theory on it. That previous generation, the Kyle Bennett's, Mike Days, Donnie Robinson generation, they had to learn Supercross when they were halfway through their career. So they grew up racing on traditional tracks. Their early pro career was on traditional tracks. And then at like 25 years old, it was like, bang, start going down 8-meter hills and jumping these jumps and hitting things at higher speeds. And it really is 2 different sports. Like if you're training for a Supercross race, it's different than if you're training for the ABA or the USWX France. Your RPM speed is completely different. Your force that you're applying and the rate of force development is completely different. How fast the jumps are coming at you. The skills are different. You don't need to pedal manual anything on Supercross. That's why the Euros, when the Euros come over, when they first come over, when they're younger, struggle with pedal manualing first jumps because they've never had to do it. But I think that generation had to learn it. Whereas my generation, the Corbins, Torin Ihogs, our age, and then the year above us, Sam, Joris, Denzel Stein, Jelly Van Gorkum, those guys, we've been doing it since we were 14, 15 years old. So we kind of just grew up with it. So we were able to handle the tracks, I think, a little bit better. And it was just more natural for us versus, Kyle Bennett, for all how amazing he was, he never looked natural riding the big track. He made riding a small track look incredibly easy and like he could do it with his eyes closed, but he never looked comfortable on the big tracks. And it's understandable because it'd be like me and you right now having to go learn something new. Like we're not going to look natural compared to, a 16-year-old doing it. But I think that's what it was just the track speed was different. And, here's a fun, I remember this, but an interesting thing. We raced that exact same track in Chula, 9, 10, 11, and 12. And it was soil tacked and it didn't change. It was the exact same track. Mike Day won the first time trial in 09. And then I won the last one in 2012. And in 4 years, it dropped nearly 3 seconds was the winning time. And
Wow.
so I think Mike's winning time in the first year would have gotten like 40th. So it wasn't just me, it was everybody kind of ramped up in that time frame. And you see it from Olympic to Olympic to Olympic. Those 4-year gaps, people get so much faster. Like you watch a race from 2016 and then you watch a race from 2012 and you can see the difference. You watch a
Mhm.
race in 2020 and 2016, you can see the difference.
Yeah.
And going into next year, you're going to see the difference between then and 2021. And that's how progression of sport naturally works.
Yeah. So you first got a coach and started following a program when you were 16. Did you have a coach your whole career, or was there ever a time where you just trained by yourself? Or
I always had a coach or somebody telling me what to do. Like I know that I'm not, going to be able to assess myself without attaching any emotion to it. And I know that I would be better served having somebody else kind of look at me and discuss. Not to say I don't want to have a voice. I want to talk about it. I don't want to just blindly follow, but I knew that it wasn't the best thing for me. Um, in 2010, at the time, Sean Dwight was the head coach for USA Cycling. He was let go in 2011, but I liked working with him. So him and I worked together from 10 until 12. And then at that point, he switched over to working with Sam Willoughby from 13 to 15. And then when him and Sam stopped working together, him and I started working together again in 2016. And
but
then
he wouldn't work with you both at the same time, or
nope,
that wouldn't work?
nope.
Or is that like you, Sam, all of it, or like that's got me curious?
I don't know the details. I was not a part of any of the conversations, but
Huh.
for whatever reason, there was a period of time where we were all fine, and then we weren't.
So there
So,
was a time where you guys all trained together?
oh yeah, me, him, and Sam, we've been in the gym and riding. Yeah, there was a minute where we were doing all this stuff together. Yeah,
How long did you guys train together until shit got weird?
it was like 6 months or so, and then I don't know exactly what happened. I mean, it's 10 years ago; it was ancient history now. But
Yeah.
we just stopped working together. And then whenever they stopped working together, Sean called me and asked me if I wanted to get back together. And I said no. Originally, I was like, nope, because I was working with PH at the time and things were going well. But then I was told by Cycling Canada. So it was me and Tori were working with PH, and I was told by Cycling Canada that I can't talk to PH at the Olympics, and he's there to help Tori, and that I'm on my own. And so I was like, I'm not going to go to the Olympics by myself, not allowed to talk to my coach, side like texting him on the side or whatever. Like I'm trying to win, just
Yeah.
anything they want to help me try to win. So then I decided at that point to, put the past in the past. And I called Sean back, and that was in like June of 2016.
Hmm. Wow. And did you work with PH the whole time? So like when you
Yeah.
quit working with Sean, like you immediately hit up Tori and PH?
No, there was a year, 2013, where I just worked with USA Cycling, and it was like Jamie, and he was helping me out a little bit in 2013, and then in 2014, he told me he had to get more into like director role, and he couldn't train people. He had to like just
Hmm.
do the business side. So I was kind of by myself again. Um, and that was when Tori and I grew up together. We were close, and I just was telling Tori about it, and he's like, "Dude, why don't you just work with us?" And then I worked with them 14, 15, and the first little bit of 16. And then, I stopped working with him and then started working with Sean. But it was like a constant theme looking back at my career. Like coaches kept not wanting me. And it was like not anything that I did per se. It was just bad situations where it didn't work out. But PH and I are real close still. He was one of the first people to congratulate me after the Olympics, and he called me when I announced my retirement and wished me all the best. And we're still in touch, and yeah, so it's been interesting, but I'm happy now because I've experienced all that I can provide a more stable environment for my guys who I choose to work with, and they don't have to worry about that stuff.
Yeah. Looking back, Can you notice a difference in the results from the years that you worked with Sean compared to the years that you worked with PH?
Um, yes and no. I think there's other factors that have to be included as well. So, like 2014, for example, was the worst year of my career, but I took Accutane. I don't know if you remember Accutane, but it was like a pill and it dried your skin out for acne. And it absolutely wrecked my system. Like my hematocrit and hemoglobin levels were half of what they're supposed to be. And so I essentially like couldn't train for 4 or 5 months because like my body was so wrecked from this medication that I took. So I would show up on the weekend, I would race, and then I wouldn't train again or touch my bike for 2 weeks. Then I go race again because like I had sponsors, I had obligations, I had to go and do it, but like my body couldn't handle doing anything. So it's like I can't really blame anything that happened that year on any trainer because there was external factors, right? Um, or like 2018 was another off year, but that was the year that I had a concussion really bad in Oldsmar and had a seizure on the track. So,
I've seen that. That was gnarly.
yeah. So that one is like physically I was in good shape, but mentally I was just not there. And it didn't matter what coach I would have had. I wasn't there. Like mentally, I was scared. And you know how it is. Like if you get on this top of a supercross so scared, like nothing good's gonna happen. So there's always external factors. I think every coach has good things to offer and can teach you stuff. And no coach is perfect.
Well, what were the here? Because now I'm super curious. What do you think was one of the biggest things that you learned from Sean, and one of the biggest things that you've learned from PH that helped you most in your career?
I would say PH taught me a lot of stuff in the gym. He was very creative in the gym with how he approached things and how he was able to take a standard exercise and just slightly tweak it and make it a little bit more specific to what you would be needing to do in racing. With Sean, I think I learned a lot more on the mental game. Like he was just so tough and just rugged, and like that's not my natural personality. Like I'm like friendly and outgoing and want to talk to people, but he kind of taught me that like you can be both. Like you can go to the track, and when you're at the track, flip a switch, be serious, do your job. And then when you go home, you can go back to being outgoing and friendly and hang out with your friends and do whatever. And that was like the biggest thing that I think that he taught me, because then when I would go to the races, as you probably remember, headphones were on, didn't talk to anybody. And that was the only way that I could do it, because as soon as I started being like my normal self, I would lose focus and I would just want to chit chat and talk about the weather or the football game or whatever. And
So you had to be locked in.
I had to go on or off. I didn't have like an in between. And that would be like the biggest thing that I've learned, or that I learned from him.
Yeah.
The other thing that I learned, I guess, too, is he was kind of on the cutting edge of training partners. So like in 2010, I was training with riders, with other people. We were doing sprints together and racing. We were doing laps together and, helping each other in the gym. It was Joey Bradford and Kaylin Young. And, we had a whole crew back then. But nowadays, everybody has training partners. Nobody does it alone. But if you think back then, everybody did everything solo. And everybody was secret. Nobody wanted to train with anybody. And we would go to the Olympic Training Center and everybody would be out there on their own plan. Nobody would work together. That was kind of, I learned like the importance of that for him. And then we always like, whenever we had a chance to, we would help our training partners out. Right. So if I had a week where I didn't have a race that weekend, but it was like the Australian National Championships or something, I'd be like on the phone with, Isaac or Max or whoever, helping them out. Just having like your brothers there to kind of help out.
Do you take pieces? I mean, I'm sure you take pieces from both to work with your own riders, right?
Yeah, I take pieces of what I've learned from them, and but also like what works for me is not going to work for you. What works for Ethan is not going to work for Joey. And so it's about understanding the personality types and like how to make somebody tick. And then it's also from a physical standpoint, looking at like, where are you lacking and how can we make it better? So for example, Ethan earlier in the year really like had a weak core and struggled with rotational stuff. He would come out of the gate and he would move around like a worm. Whereas like Joey was solid and he didn't have that at all. Joey was working more on timing and explosiveness, whereas Ethan didn't have to work on that. He had to work on anti-rotational stuff. So Ethan was doing a lot more core work and, single arm dumbbell bench press and, things like that to really work on that weakness that he had. Whereas as Joey was doing totally different stuff. And I think the mark of a good coach is that they have a general philosophy and then they tailor their philosophy based around what that athlete needs specifically. The way, and there's also, mesomorphs and ectomorphs and different body types, right? So Joris today and myself or Sam Willoughby were three very different body types. And so what's going to work for gangly, skinny, tall Joris is not going to work for short, stocky, buff Sam, right? Like everybody's different. So you got to kind of tailor it based on what that athlete needs.
Yeah. So you mentioned environment earlier. What about your environment growing up do you think played the biggest part in creating a gold medalist?
I think there's a couple things.
Other than hard work and a lot of bike time.
Yeah, no, I think there's a couple things. I think number one is my parents never forced me to do anything. My parents never yelled at me and screamed at me and told me, you've got to go do 30 sprints or we're not going to the race. They would say, hey, we think you should probably be out doing sprints if you want to get the best result that you can. And then if I didn't do sprints and then after the race I was crying and mad or whatever, they'd be like, Connor, how do you expect to do well when you didn't do your sprints? Right. So I think they did a good job of kind of teaching me those lessons and letting me learn them myself rather than forcing me to do something that maybe my head or heart wasn't in. And so like they gave me the opportunity, but I had to figure it out on my own, I guess. Then the other thing I would say is that, I was always encouraged to reach for the stars, right? Like even when I wasn't winning or I wasn't that great, it was never like, hey, you're not good enough. It was always keep working at it. You can get better. Maybe you're not going to win, but you can make the main. Maybe you can make a podium, right? And it was just a very positive environment. And I think that's something that, is very important because we go to the track, we all see it. The parents yelling at the kids, telling their kid like more laps. You suck. You got second. It's like, that's just going to make the kid hate the sport and resent you, Yeah. And I think that I have a healthy relationship with both of my parents now because it was always positive. And not to say they wouldn't get on me or get hard on me. I mean, I'll never forget. I was like 9 years old. I didn't make a main one time and I threw my helmet and my dad came over and picked my helmet up and he made me go apologize to the team manager. And he pulled me from racing the next day. And he said, don't you ever disrespect your equipment, especially if somebody gave it to you. And he made me go sit and watch the races the next day and not race. Right. So, but it was just teaching the right lessons, sportsmanship, effort, integrity, things like that, rather than, win at all costs or we don't love you.
Yeah. What were some of the best character traits that you did your best to pick up from your dad?
Yeah, I think just kind of everything I just talked about, right? Like my dad's a hard worker. Like he's always, since I was a kid, he'll go into the office early and he'll do what needs to be done in order to, reach his version of success. And that was provide for his family. And if that meant working from 4 a.m. till 7 p.m., to get some overtime hours in to be able to go to the races or whatever, like that's what he would do. So, that selflessness, that sacrifice, and then also just, I really learned from him, like the key to a lot of things is just relationships and not being transactional. I think that's a mistake that a lot of athletes make is they look at everything as transactional of like, I'm going to pay you X and you're going to give me a training program, or I'm going to ride your frame because you're paying me, X amount per month. Whereas it's more about just building a relationship, right? And like every sponsor I've ever worked with, I could pick up the phone and call them. because like I went out of my way to make sure that I have a relationship with them and it's not transactional. And that's something I learned from my dad. And he's good at that in business. He has to be good at that, but something I just picked up. And I didn't even realize it when I was a kid that I was picking up on it. But then you get older and you realize you picked up on it.
Yeah, those are cool traits. Do you think that your Olympic gold medal year was the best year of your career?
Ironically, it was one of the worst as far as results. I only raced 4 races that year. 5, I guess, 5 races. So I started off the year in Oldsmar. Well, I won the national championships. I had podium one of the days. Then went to Argentina for the first World Cup. I got second at that World Cup. And then a week later, I broke my wrist. April 1st, I broke my wrist. I'll never forget that because it's April Fool's Day. And when I was calling people to tell them I broke my wrist, nobody believed me. They thought I was like, guys, I wouldn't joke about this. Like, this is not a laughing matter. And then the next race I did was like a tune-up race in Canada 3 weeks before the Olympics to like do some laps before the Olympics. Did the Olympics. I had to go back and have another surgery after the Olympics to finish fixing my wrist. And then I did the Grands. So I didn't win anything that year except for one race. But I think as far as my best year, I mean, obviously it's really like maybe the birth of my child will be like the only thing that tops that day. But I think the biggest thing that it did was going into London. I was the favorite. It was basically like it was a win or it was a bust. Getting into the main would have been a failure. With Rio, I barely made that team. I was just happy to be there, right? Like if Corbin doesn't win the trials, they got a decision to make, and we got drama to deal with, right? and like I got a phone call before I had ridden a bike that basically said, "Hey, you've got 48 hours to prove that you can ride before we pick you for this team." And my wrist was still broken in Rio. The doctor told me legally I can't clear you. Make your own choice. And but what that did is I was just happy to be there. I was just stoked that I was in the gate, so I was able to relax into it a little bit more.
So you had a broken wrist when you won the gold medal?
Yeah.
Wow.
So I had a bone graft in April when I got the surgery, and the Olympics was in August. But the bone graft was because the bone that I broke died. Like there was no blood; it was completely dead. And so they had to take a piece of bone from my upper arm and then put it to where the dead bone was. And it worked, and it was like coming back to life, but it wasn't 100% healed until like October. And then that was when I went back in for another surgery after the Grands that year. And they took all the metal out that was in my wrist because I couldn't move it. They basically locked it in place for the Olympics. And then after the Olympics and after it was healed, they went in and took all the metal back out. And now I have full motion back, but I still can't go down. Like I only have a little bit down.
Were you feeling pain race day, or is it just blocked out at that point? It's the Olympics.
Once you were in the gate and the adrenaline was going, no, like it was, so much adrenaline you couldn't feel anything.
Could you wear a brace, or were you wearing a brace?
I was wearing a brace. Yep. But like that day, if I wanted to, like if I pushed on it, it would hurt. I mean, for probably a year afterwards, if I pushed on it, I mean, even now, if I wrench on it too hard, it'll hurt. I still have screws in there, and it's it's never going to be 100%, but worth it.
Yeah, yeah, I bet. What do you think was your most dominant year in your career where everything seemed to be clicking right? Or did you ever have a year that felt like that?
I think the easy answer on that one would be 2017. But I had a lot of like streaks or like times that it would go really well. in 2011 to 2012, I won 3 straight World Cups, but that was back when it was only 1 day, not 2 days. So to do 3 in a row then was a lot harder. And I won like 6 straight time trials that year, those years as well. So I was like on a heater, but it was like half 11, half 12, so it wasn't like a full year.
Yeah.
2013 was a good year. I mean, I won the World Cup title, got second in the ABA, so I mean that was a good one. But 17 would be the best, I think. 10 regular season wins, win the Grands, win the Rock, win the title, and then I got second in the World Cup series, but Sylvain Andre cut the white line in the main, and I should have gotten that World Cup title, but white lines are just suggestions.
Yeah. Like, what do you think was different other than the results of those years? Like, were you different mentally? Were you doing something different physically or in your training, or
I think what it is,
different?
I think what it is, and I think this is, I'm going to tie back to Joris. I think this is one of the reasons why Joris has been so successful. Joris has largely avoided injury and having to physically be injured, take time off, mentally have to go through the fear of kind of getting over the crash and the accident and crashing again, but also physically having to stop what you've been building, take some steps back and then rebuild it, and then rebuild that momentum. And even Sam, before his accident, didn't have an injury. He didn't miss any races from 2008, 2009 till he got really hurt. And when you don't have to take time off, and you don't have to go and take 3 months, 6 months off, it's a huge advantage, physically and mentally. And I think for me, my best years coincided when I was able to build momentum and not kind of get knocked off, right? So, I broke my wrist in 2016, and that was a full year basically, dealing with that. 2017, I avoided injury. Then 2018, I had that concussion. Kind of built back. 2019 was a good year. Won the title that year. Started 2020 off great, winning World Cups. It was all good, and then COVID happened, right? And then win the Grands, and then win some races in 2021, build that momentum, and then get hurt at the Tokyo Olympics. And so, really, what it all coincided was when I was able to avoid injury for extended periods of time and build that momentum, good things happened. When I was having to build back, that's when you kind of would struggle. But I think that's going to be true for everybody, right? So, I look for like Wood and Isaac right now when they're come back from their injuries, they're not going to show up 100% ready to go, and they're going to be jumping in with Joris, who hasn't missed a beat. And it's not easy to do that. And you do that 3-4 times over a course of a career, it wears on you, and it's hard. And I think that's also why Joris is able to have gone for as long as he's gone, is because he hasn't had to deal with that stuff. Good for him, honestly. Like, good for you, dude. Like, that's awesome to go that long and avoid serious injury. But you look at other riders, and they've had a lot of injuries, and they choose to step away just because they're tired of getting hurt. And then there's that fear, and you touch a pot and the pot's hot. You don't want to touch the pot again,
Yeah. Do you think that there's like you talk about Joris going so long without hitting her, and Sam, and even you going through that time, like, is there a way to, I know you can never avoid it, right? But is there a way to better your chances, or like, how has Joris done it?
Certainly. Well, I think there's always going to be an element of chance, right? So, Isaac had a big crash in Reno this past weekend. If he lands 2 inches to the left, maybe he just skins his knee and he's totally fine. Or if he had just happened to bonk the jump a little bit, he wouldn't have even crashed. Like, there's always going to be an element of chance. And I'm sure you're the same. I've seen dudes have these insane crashes where you're convinced they're dead, and they get up and they just dust themselves off and they're fine. And I've seen dudes tip over in a turn and then they can't get up because they've broken their shoulder. Like, there's an element of chance and how you fall and how you hit, for sure. But the things that you can do, You can be smart with when you choose to ride, when you choose not to. If you had a horrible night's sleep and you're sore and you're not in the mood and you feel your reaction time is slowed, maybe it's better to take the day off and chill than it is to go and do half laps. And having the maturity and the long game in mind of avoiding that injury is important. Or if you're at the gym and you feel your back start to bother you, maybe don't push through it and continue on doing those deadlifts and just call it a day and live to fight another day. And I think that's something that's easier when you get older. But younger athletes, it's just every session is the end of the world when you're 19 years old and you don't have that kind of ability to think big picture. But I think that's a way to avoid it. And then I also think that like strategic risk taking, right? So you see some athletes that'll just throw it in the first turn every time, no matter what. Moto, quarter, semi, big race, small race, they're just going to go for it. That's not going to last long term. You got to know when to pick and choose your times to really throw it in there and take that risk. Moto 2, round 2 on a Saturday USA BMX race, probably not the time to get crazy. But if you're in 5th place at the World Championships in the semi, send it. It's just that strategic risk taking.
Yeah. Do you miss racing at all, or do you still ride your bike?
I miss elements of it, and then there's other elements that I miss 0%.
Like what?
What I miss most is it's almost a form of meditation when you lock in for a few hours, and for a few hours, nothing else in the world matters. Everything else is on pause, and you are so present and so focused. And that feeling that you get behind the gate when you're in lane number 1 in the main event at a World Cup or at the Grands, all the eyes are on you, the pressure's on, you've been working for this for all this time, but you're just sitting there calm, focused, locked in, doing your thing. Like, that's a really fun feeling. And I hated that feeling as a younger athlete. I avoided it and I struggled with it. But as I got older, I began to embrace it and enjoy it. And now I miss that feeling. And it's just that feeling of like, I'm about to rip these dudes' heads off. Like I miss that feeling a little bit. But what I don't miss getting hurt. I don't miss traveling. I don't miss my back being sore. I don't miss the constant pressure, because for 10 years, it was, if I don't get on the podium today, today's a failure. If I don't win this race, people are going to be disappointed in me. I'm going to be disappointed in me. Like, that's a lot to deal with for a long period of time. Or like sitting at home on a Tuesday night thinking I want dessert, and it's like, I can't have dessert because Doris ain't eating dessert tonight. Now it's like, yeah, give me 2 pieces of dessert, whatever. Like, there's elements of it that you miss, and then there's elements that you don't. And then I do ride. Occasionally I'll go to the BMX track. If I've got people that are here want to ride, I'll go ride with them. But I've really been loving riding my mountain and my road bike. Just, it's stuff I couldn't do when I was racing. And I'm kind of learning it and exploring it. And I feel like a bit of a kid again, kind of learning how to do a new sport. It's like similar, but it's different enough to where I'm a kid again.
Yeah. What skills or things did you gain chasing the BMX dream for so long that you're now taking into your, say, adult life?
Yeah. I think that's the most important thing. And that's why I try to tell people, like, the percentage of people that will make it to the Olympics is tiny, right? I mean, since 2008, there's been 8 American men who have made an Olympic team. And maybe that number grows to 9 next year if Cam Wood makes it, or if Joey Lito makes it, or if Jeremy makes it. Maybe it gets to 9. The number of athletes that have retired and never worked again off of BMX is like 2. Maris and Mariana, and it's because they're from countries that, pay them handsomely because of what they did. You're going to get a job one day. You're going to work one day, and the likelihood of BMX being, it is low. But what you learn from it, you can take everywhere. Discipline, hard work, sportsmanship, integrity, dealing with people you like, dealing with people you don't like, but you have to deal with. Negotiation and sponsorships. Just all these different things that you learn. You learn about yourself because you have to go to that dark place sometimes when you're in pain and you don't want to do that last set, or when you're in pain before the main event and this main event really matters. And you have to learn about who you are and how to make yourself tick. So that's the stuff that I love, and that's the stuff that I try to tell people. You're going to get more out of that than chasing district #1 for 12-year-olds or whatever. Like, that's not what you're going to remember from this sport. But for me, the biggest thing that I learned is, I guess, 2 things. One, you can do everything right and still just get a little unlucky. And it could be not your fault. You could be, doing everything you can. You could have eaten right, done things right, be executing to the best of your abilities, and you're in second in the semi, and the rider in first goes down, you hit it. And you did nothing wrong. Or you get a flat tire, and it makes you slide out in a turn, and you hit your head and get a concussion, right? Like, I didn't do anything there. It happened. But life goes on, and sometimes it's just what happens. But on the flip side of that, I also learned that even when things aren't going right, you can still make it happen. It doesn't all have to be perfect. So being perfect doesn't guarantee the result that you want. You just have to go and do your best regardless of what's going on.
Connor, thanks for having the conversation with me. Thanks for your time, dude. I really appreciate it. And good luck with everything you got going in the future, and maybe our paths will cross again.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Later, Connor.
See ya.
How about that?
Yeah, that was an awesome conversation. Well done, my friend.
Hey, thanks again, dude. Wow, that was a crazy conversation. He's one of the most insightful people in the sport.
Yeah, that was a phenomenal conversation. I appreciate it. He was dropping so much gold in this conversation about what it takes to get to that level. Wow, that was brilliant.
You're almost really punny for that one.
Yeah.
All right, Edwin. It's always a good time meeting with you, and you have a good the rest of your day, man. I'll see you on the next one.
Peace, brother.
Later.